My ego drove me to be in the US, and I just wanted my milk in all the grocery stores where my ex-girlfriend shopped, and we lost millions.
From shaking up the dairy aisle to building a global brand.
So we started out in just one city. Now we're in 12 countries.
Today's guest built Koita Foods out of Dubai with one simple mission: give families more choice when it comes to milk.
I can take an idea and productize it in a very short period of time, and that continues to be our advantage.
Here's the twist. He wasn't a food guy. He traded corporate boardrooms for supermarket shelves to build something deeply personal.
My daughter, Serena, had issues with digesting milk that was produced locally, and she would just break out in hives. Investors don't know the business as much as the founder. So sometimes you take cues from investors, but they've never started a business from scratch.
Want to know how he did it? Let's get into it. Mustafa, you left the high-tech world to start a food company from scratch. Why take that leap?
Oh, that's a good question. And I think there were a couple elements that were involved in that. I think number one, I was actually in the defense business, and I felt like I wasn't really being challenged in the business for a long time, and I just wanted to learn and be challenged a little bit more. I was always kind of anti-corporate. I was like butting heads with my boss all the time. And I felt like it got to a point where either he was going to fire me or I was going to quit anyways. And I wasn't really designed for corporate America. So that would be like one element of it. The second thing is when I started Koita, I was in the middle of sort of my midlife crisis, to be very transparent. And I wasn't very healthy. I had a lot of bad habits. I was kind of fat back then, a little fatter than I am now. And I was really passionate about healthy living. And I knew healthy eating was sort of part of that. And I think I just had that entrepreneurial bug. I'd seen in the region, Dubai in the region is all about entrepreneurship. A lot of my friends had like second generation businesses, third generation businesses. And I always felt like it'd be great to be able to kind of control my destiny, and entrepreneurship sort of offered that. So there was sort of like 2-3 elements that all collided at once. And then I ended up quitting my job and starting Koita.
But now if you look at it, the food industry has transformed a lot. But in 2013, did people think you were insane for starting a dairy business?
Yeah, everyone thought I was insane, everyone. But what really kind of triggered it wasn't that it was so different, but my daughter, Serena, had issues with digesting milk that was produced locally, and she would just break out in hives. And when I'd go to the United States over our summer holidays, we drink some of the organic milk there, and it was fine for her. So actually, some of the inspiration came from my daughter's challenges as a parent. And then luckily, I realized that I wasn't the only parent that was having that problem. So we ended up being the second organic dairy brand that ever came to the UAE. And it was sort of triggered by my daughter.
I love that story. But I mean, it's good in theory, but how did you practically actually start Koita? How did you learn the ropes of an industry you knew nothing about and bring a product to life?
Yeah, look, I think that there was 2 elements to it. One, I was moving from the defense business to the dairy business, and I had no FMCG experience. So one is that in any industry, when you cross industries, I think it's not about the experience set, but it's your skill set, right? And so being in the defense business, I understood how to talk to people. I learned how to listen to people. I learned how to approach failure. I learned how to learn from my mistakes. And those are the elements that helped me, I think, in being successful. I think the biggest element, and that's probably rooted in how I was designed as a kid, is just persistence. So I think the message I have to anyone is that don't be intimidated by moving from one industry to another, or one thing that you don't know and something that you do know. As long as you really put your heart, and whoever wants it the most will get it. And so I just wanted it really bad. I wanted to do this for my daughter. I wanted to learn the FMCG business. And so I learned, and it took a lot of baby steps to get there.
From idea to launch, how long did that take?
The idea has been evolving over 10 years. And kind of what I wanted on day one is different than what I wanted on year 2, year 5, and year 10. And so I think my message is that you don't need that vision, super final idea on day one. You kind of learn from your mistakes, and you kind of figure it out along the way.
That's refreshing to hear. But did you have any idea on what your goal out of this business was?
Yeah, so I knew that I wanted to get into food. You don't make $1 million overnight, but even during a downturn, it doesn't go up and down. And I was thinking that I wanted to create a business for my kids, and I don't want them to stress out, or freak out. I don't want them to be in a cyclical industry. So that was one. I knew that I wanted to get into the food business. 2, I was really about healthy living because I was unhealthy at the time. And so within food business, I knew I wanted to get into healthy foods. And the reason I found out I liked milk was, one, it was personal because my daughter was having issues with milk. But when I went to the food shows, I didn't have a lot of money to buy research. We were broke, right? And so I couldn't buy this Gartner report for $200,000. So when I would walk through the trade shows, I realized that the guys with the biggest boots and the ones that were throwing the nicest parties were the milk guys. And that was kind of a signal, like a street smart signal to say, there must be a lot of money in milk. And the other guys were the meat. So the milks and meat guys in all the trade shows dominated the conferences. And I was like, okay, those three things kind of make me realize that I think the milk business is where I need to be. And there wasn't a lot of milk players, organic milk players here. So those are the kinds of things that I did know. And then I evolved sort of the rest of the business after that.
And how long did it take you for you to be like, wait, this is something real. This is something that can be really successful?
Even today, I'm like, am I successful? And I mean, I know I am from my financials and reputation. But, when you start a business, I still have that small company mentality in the back of my head. So when you ask that question, I have to smile. When I started the business, before I launched anything, I started asking a lot of moms. I would just put coffee mornings with moms together. I had like 10 coffee mornings with moms. I want to ask them questions and be like, what do you want? They were like, we don't have an organic milk that's whole fat. We don't have an organic milk that's in a recyclable paper. We don't have something that speaks to our kids. Vitamin D was a big issue. No one had organic milk with vitamin D. So I just listened to them. And then we searched the world and created this awesome product, literally based on what consumers were telling us. By just listening, the product just started selling out month after month after month. And I think when we started hearing consumers calling us and saying, thank you for bringing this, that's when sort of the light bulb went off. And I was like, hey, I didn't screw up. Like this is making sense. And then we just started scaling it. But it's funny, I still don't think I'm successful. I think it's because I have a really tough Indian Gujarati father who's never satisfied, So in the back of my mind, I'm like, am I successful? Like my dad hasn't said anything yet, So that's how I kind of think about it.
What will make you feel successful then?
It's funny. The bar keeps moving. I think I've hit a milestone and then I'm like, okay, what's next? But I think for our brand, the reason I'm around is I want to have impact on health in the GCC.
It sounds very personal to you, I think, and that's what drives you as well.
Yeah.
Also, what's interesting about your journey is that you've bootstrapped. So you had everything on the line for this, right? Talk to me more about that decision to bootstrap.
I noticed that a lot of entrepreneurs, when they were starting, they kind of reverse engineer their business plan around, they have this fallacy in their head where I have to go get the VC money and what does the investor want and how do I reverse engineer? And then I raise money and then I start the business. And a couple things I've learned is that investors don't know the business as much as the founder, right? So sometimes you take cues from investors, but they've never started a business from scratch. So they don't really get what's going on. There are some investors that totally get it. And those are some, really good ones.
And rare ones to find.
Rare ones too. Yeah. So I think that the other element was that I left the corporate world for freedom. And if I raised money on day one and gave up 51% of a huge portion, I'd just be working for someone else. What's the difference, right? And so it wasn't a financial issue. I just wanted to be able to control my destiny, and so that's what made me want to bootstrap it. And I thought about it. I was like, let me start a business that I can self-fund. And I think the second reason I was able to bootstrap it was not only because I wanted to, but I didn't believe in go big or go home. Forget about what the people are saying, And I was like, I'm just going to launch 2 products, right? I just want to be in Dubai. I don't need to be all over the world right now. And I was like, I don't need to be big in 3 years. I just want to get the proof of concept working. And so when you reduce your supply chain and reduce the amount that you're launching into the market, you reduce your cost required. And so I actually think that's a better business plan because you make small mistakes, less expensive mistakes early on, and then you learn, and then you go to another. So we started out in just one city. Now we're in 12 countries, but it was a really slow, methodical, calculated growth aspect. And it allowed me to still be able to retain, 100% of the ownership today. And that allows me to have my freedom. And that's something there's no amount of money that could pay me for that. I love having my freedom. Now, we will probably start scaling in the future, but what I've had so far, I feel blessed to have that freedom.
But were you always confident that this was the right decision? Or were there times where you're like, oh, I wish I got some money in?
Yeah, so I was not always confident. In fact, every step of the way, even till today, I've had insecurities, freakouts. The first 5 years of entrepreneur just sucked. There were days where I was crying. I was like, my ego was like, what are my friends going to say? What's my dad going to say? Back to childhood issues. And so, yeah, of course, that comes up, and I think that's normal. But I think now I've built up such a confidence, not in my business plan, but I built a confidence in myself that, I look at all the shit that I've figured out in the past. If there's another challenge that comes up, I'll kind of figure it out. So yeah, those times cross your mind, and you do kind of freak out, if that answers your question.
Is there some other piece of advice that you'd give to other entrepreneurs in terms of the early days?
You got to get advice. And the best advice that I've ever gotten is from my peers that are in a similar position or 1 or 2 years ahead of me. Like, I think that in the early days, you're like, oh, my uncle who has a Rolex and 10 Mercedes, he's rich, so he's the guy I should get advice from. Or the VP at a huge company, who runs a $1 billion organization, that's the one I should get advice from. And what I caution entrepreneurs is, especially, you're starting from scratch. You don't have any money. You have limited time and resources. You need to ask people who've been through that shitty, no time, no money situation to get the best advice, because they actually have the realistic experiences. I've gone to people that are super successful, and they're like, oh, you should hire 10 people. You should launch this. And I'm like, I can barely make payroll this month. Like, what are you talking about? So I think it's really important that you get advice from the right people. The second thing is, you got to get advice from people that are willing to tell you, hey, go screw yourself. You don't know what you're talking about. So some of my best friends are the ones that just tell me to my face the honest truth and don't sugarcoat stuff. Because if you have yes people around you, you're screwed. You're not going to make it, And so I think those are kind of the two pieces of advice that I give people.
You need people around you to challenge you. I mean, that's the only way you can grow.
Exactly.
I think what's interesting about what you do is milk as a product is very hard to revolutionize. So how do you ensure that you can stand out?
I look for markets where there's a lot of tired brands and lack of innovation, because when there's lack of innovation, tired brands, and people feel like they're comfortable, those are ripe opportunities to go in and disrupt, right? And so first of all, I didn't see at the time a lot of organic milk brands, right? Later on, my son had a lactose intolerance problem, and he was having huge stomach aches, and I didn't see a lot of clean lactose-free milk, So I actually did see opportunities, and I think the only advantage really that small underfunded companies have against the big guys is agility. That's it. They can outspend you, they can outsmart you, but you can just move faster. And so I saw a couple of these like gaps, which were small at the time, and I just moved faster. And we continue to move faster. Now, obviously, as we get bigger, we get a little bit slower because we have to introduce processes, but you got to like manage that balance. So to answer your question, I did see some gaps in the market, and part of it was personal. It's like my daughter, my son. Luckily, if I had another child, I'd launch another, range of milk probably. But it was a combination of those triggers.
I mean, the proof is in the pudding. I mean, you've expanded also from Dubai to so many other countries.
Yeah.
Tell me more about those expansions.
I think the biggest lesson that I've ever learned is that when you're deploying into a market or selling into a market, make sure you get the job done in market one before you go to market two. Right. And we early on, when I got some initial success, I think it was my ego. We got into this like flag planting exercise. I was like, I want to have flags on the map everywhere. And I realized that if you expand too fast, right, you're not getting all the lessons learned, and you're not doing the job in country one. And actually, if you get the job done in country one 100%, you maximize your potential and then go to country two, you have a higher probability of being more successful in that second country. And by the way, with limited resources, can you imagine me being in UAE and being in Saudi and Qatar all at the same time without having the infrastructure to win? So, I have a philosophy that it's better to go an inch wide and a mile deep versus a mile wide and an inch deep across multiple markets. So I don't plant flags anymore.
And I think a pro that you have is you don't have VCs telling you expand, go to
Yeah,
as many
yeah.
countries as possible. Yeah.
Well, a lot of good investors would say, don't expand, get the job done. Like I have a board member and man, he gives it to me straight, his name is Amjad. And he's like, don't even go into market 2 until you finish the job in market 1. And so I would say there are investors that say expand, but the smart investors are the ones that are like, get the job done in market 1 and then go to market 2.
What was the hardest market for you?
Well, look, a long time ago, we launched in the United States about 5-6 years ago. And I was joking. I joke with a lot of my friends. I think that my ego drove me to be in the US and I just wanted my milk in all the grocery stores where my ex-girlfriend shopped, and that kind of drove it. And we lost, millions, going into that market. And there were some investors, potential investors like types and friends that were like, oh man, you're in the US, it's the biggest market in the world. And man, we just lost our ass. And what I realized is that when we shut that down, ego check, right? And we started focusing on just here in the region, like UAE, Saudi, Kuwait, Qatar. These are very resilient markets. We just started focusing and taking all those resources that we're wasting in a different hemisphere. It impacted our bottom line, and we started killing it. Our cash conversion cycles came down, our EBITDA came up. Like it just made it work. So focus is a lesson I've learned by losing lots of money, and it works.
That's a great story.
Yeah. I got a lot of great stories if you want. A lot of war stories if you want to hear them. But that was a big learning.
We'll get into those. Another personal question for you.
Sure.
A moment where you thought everything's going to fall apart.
Ooh, okay. So after COVID, our business like doubled, right? But the company and the infrastructure hadn't, right? And so even though we grew so much, the people that we had placed, the processes that we had placed just wasn't there. And our finance department, like one thing I've learned is you need to know your finances. You need to know operating cash. You need to know your EBITDA. You need to know everything.
You can't run a business without that.
Yeah. And for a while, because the transactions were small and the amounts were small, and you didn't. My finance department was like one junior accountant, and I looked at finances as, and audits were like, I do the month and I need the finances, and it's a recording. It's a recording process. It just records and you see the numbers. What I've realized later on in life, and again, I lost a lot of money and learned this lesson, is that when you look at the numbers, it actually helps you make future strategic decisions. Like, where are you making your highest gross margins? Which markets and customers have, what is the cost to serve? Like all these ratios and stuff, only now I know. I remember we just started losing operating cash. We were just bleeding, right? And I realized a lot of it had to do with the fact that I didn't have the right senior person in place. And I was just like going cheap, and I was like, and so what we ended up doing is investing in our finance. We got a lot of very senior people in. We built out the team. And on my G&A, it was like a cost center, but it was actually one of the best investments we made in finance. And now I've got, a really great team. There's a guy named Yashin who runs my finance. So I love him. He's doing a great job with this team. His whole team's doing amazing. And now I can make better strategic decisions because I'm close and I can see the numbers. And that I think that was a time where I was crying. I was like, oh my God, we're going out of business. And what was scary about it is I didn't have visibility on what was happening.
Yeah.
And when there's unknown in the business, that freaks you out even more.
And any business regrets that you have?
So look, absolutely not, because I think some of the words, and there's a philosophical answer to that, because if I hadn't screwed up as much, I wouldn't have learned lessons. So for example, we were in a GCC country and we gave unsecured credit lines, and I was out $250,000 and I was about to write it off because I didn't ask for letters of credit. I didn't secure it, things like that. But, now we have customers that are ordering, $500,000 or millions of dollars. And now there's nothing that's not secured.
Yeah.
But if I hadn't made that screw up in the past at $250,000, I wouldn't have learned how to secure much bigger amounts. And the problem could have been much bigger. So look, to answer your question, do I regret? Yeah, I do. But in hindsight, if I hadn't made that screw up. So I think my message is that your mistakes are just actually golden nuggets in disguise. And it's how, if you look at the mistake and get emotional, you're wasting energy. You got to look at your mistakes and be like, okay, I screwed up. You got to forgive yourself. What did I learn? And just move on. Like get on with it, right? And I think that's what sets success away from folks that fail.
You definitely have to fail fast.
You got to move fast. Yeah, you got to get over it.
And what's your ultimate vision for Koita Foods?
You know, right now, I'd love to be able to tell all the health ministers in the GCC that I was able to enable them to bring cardiovascular disease down from 35 to 25%, or lactose intolerance issues from 36% to the low teens. Like if I could tell the health ministers of the region that I had an impact, that would make me happy.
That's something definitely impactful. I mean, to drive you every single day.
Yeah,
keep going.
I need a challenge. I always need to be challenged. So yeah, that's kind of what we're trying to do here.
Good luck on that challenge.
Yeah,
we'll get it done. Make it happen.
We'll get it done. We'll get it done. Yeah.
I really enjoyed this conversation, but we do have to wrap it up with our final question.
Okay.
If you were 21 today, what advice would you give yourself?
Oh, 21. I miss those days. I'm 50 right now. And so I miss my 20. I think I would say that I would tell myself to go easy on myself. I was really hard on myself. You know, I think I set the bar, and that idea of like perfection as an entrepreneur, perfection even as a professional, I'd say, you know, you gotta give yourself a break sometimes, because you create your own stress. You know, people build stories in their head. And I think I would just say, you know, give yourself a break, like, you know, forgive yourself. I think that's really, really important for you to move on and get over things and let go of things, you know. And I think I wish I'd learned that lesson earlier in life.
You form your own reality as well, right? It's what you tell yourself that becomes your reality.
And sometimes you tell yourself the wrong reality, right? You got to just be a bit more grounded. And I think that's a very personal issue, and it's not easy. It's easier said than done. But I wish I'd learned that a little earlier in life.
I love that. Yeah. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, me too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.